On today's episode, we have Lakshmi. Lakshmi heads the Trek Experience team at India Hikes. She also heads the Green Trail Initiative. With her team, she is constantly working towards making trekking a more sustainable sport in India. So Lakshmi is a strong advocate as well of zero waste and follows a vegan lifestyle. So Lakshmi, we're excited to have you on board. So welcome
Thank
aboard to today's Not Foods episode.
thank you very
Um,
much. Thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. We have a few questions for you, and then we kind of end with like a quick rapid fire round.
Yes,
So should we start?
sure, sure.
Okay. So when did you realize you wanted to become vegan, and where does this whole journey even start?
Um, so I was a vegetarian. So my family eats non-vegetarian.
Okay.
So one of my visits to one of the butcher stores when I was very young, I was very deeply impacted by what I saw in front of
Mhm.
me, and I decided to turn vegetarian at that point of time. I think at that point of time for me, I didn't understand the concept of being a vegan and
Mhm.
what it meant. So I was vegan as I was a vegetarian for most part of my life. And around 4.5 years ago, so there was this movie screening by one of the vegan outreach organizations, and it was a documentary called The Domain. So this documentary is basically 1.5 hours footage of um, uh, like hidden camera footage from factory farming in Australia, different places in Australia. I think 20 minutes into the documentary, I just could not uh, bear watching it anymore. I think I could see many people stepping out. I think within just 10 minutes, people started stepping out. I was hoping I could pull myself a little to see the end of it, but I just couldn't. I think within the next 20, by around 20-25 minutes, I just couldn't take it. Um, and when I stepped out, I decided that I'm going to be a vegan. Um, and um, that was the start. I think until then, I was always very dicey about switching to becoming a vegan. I was quite happy with my choice of being a vegetarian, and I was never uh, really I think I was quite ignorant, and I think conveniently ignorant about being a vegetarian. I was um, telling myself stories that we don't really do much harm to cows, at least in India. But I think deep down I knew that was not the truth. And I think the documentary kind of made me come into terms with that. And I just took a promise that I'm never going to go back to dairy again. So that made me switch to being a vegan for the last 4 years. Yes, four,
Okay,
five
amazing.
years now, I think. Yeah.
Okay. And what have you found most challenging in adopting like a vegan lifestyle?
I think initially in the beginning it was very difficult. At that point of time, I was actually having curd rice almost every other day, and uh, cheese was a very big part of my daily life. So I think giving up on things that was a daily part of my diet was difficult.
Mhm.
But I was a big sweets person. I think I love eating cake. I love ice creams, and all of that was a challenge. But I think 2 months into I think being a vegan and being sticking with it, even though it was challenging and a lot of temptations come your way. I think sticking to it helped in being able to get to a point where it wasn't tempting anymore. I think I think about 2 months, I just stopped having any cravings for it, which was quite surprising.
Yeah.
But yeah, that happened, and I think it has been quite smooth sailing after that. There has been accidents where I think unintentionally there has been mix-ups in my order or something when I eat out or when I go to somebody's house and they don't realize and something happens. This
Mhm.
happens every once in a while, but outside those mishaps, I don't think I've had any issues um, being a vegan.
Okay. Interesting. And I feel personally, there's this stigma when it comes to being a vegan. People often say that people who are vegan are always trying to guilt those around, for them to become vegan. So what would you say to people who usually poke fun at veganism, or where do you stand here?
For me, being a vegan is a very moral dilemma. It's a very ethical uh, point of view. So I'm not doing it for myself. I'm doing it for the animals I feel very passionate about. I feel they have every right to live a fair and an equitable life. And if anyone would, I mean, how any one of us would respond to somebody getting hurt on the street, even though they are strangers to us, I think I feel the same way about the animals that we use to
Mhm.
supplement our diet, especially when I know that I can do without it. It's not that I can, it's a very necessary part of my diet. So I would argue back saying, it's not about me, it's not about you, it's about the animals who are going to be at the end of um, uh, the receiving end of your decisions. And I'm okay being on the other side. If what I say makes you feel guilty, it's good. I mean, guilt is the primary emotion that has made me stop eating. And if it makes you feel reconsider your thought at the cost of my relationship with you, I'm okay with that.
Mhm. I think that's wonderfully put. So I know that Lakshmi, you lead the Green Trails initiative. So how did you even start this initiative, and how did it come into being?
Right. I didn't start Green Trails at India Hikes. It was existing before I
Okay.
even joined India Hikes. I was help. I mean, I was part of the bigger part of Green Trails journey at India Hikes.
Mm-hmm.
And the journey started with the fact that we noticed that all our treks, especially on our treks, sustainability is not the uh, default way of how people go and do a trek. Practices are still not standardized when it comes to how trekking is done, especially in terms of what are the impacts that we are leaving on the trip.
Mm-hmm.
Be it in the kind of consumption that we do, the how we trek, what do we wear, what do we bring, what do we eat. Everything has an impact when we trek, and our goal is to try and see if we can minimize it. If we can find a way where, when somebody goes out on the trek, we are actually not causing any adverse impact for the region where we trek in, because ultimately these are national parks, wildlife areas, wildlife sanctuaries, where these are the homes to many um, fragile um, these are the fragile ecosystems, and we don't want to be intrusive or invasive in these regions, and that's the goal when it comes to green tails, and that's what we are trying to do and accomplish with our work here.
Awesome. So I know that you trek a lot, you travel a lot. So when you travel and trek, how do you continue to follow a vegan lifestyle?
Yes. Luckily, it has been quite easy so far. I've not had a place where I needed to find, or where it has been extremely difficult to find vegan alternatives. Primarily because you always have options like bread, you always have options like rice, which are very easy, at least within India. I mean, being a vegan in India is quite easy if you know to anticipate dairy in your food and to tell them very clearly not to put dairy in the food. So I think in that sense, I think it has been quite easy. Um, Only during travel, sometimes I have found it, like during transit on the way. There are
Okay.
places where I have found it challenging. But even there, I think I kind of have learned to be more prepared in
Mhm.
terms of carrying enough snacks with me, enough like dry fruits, nuts, some condiments like pickle or chutney or anything that I know that if I have something along with it, I can feel full. So those have gone a long way in helping how I during my travel, especially. Um, One of the biggest challenges I faced was when I was traveling in Kyrgyzstan. This was predominantly a meat based
Sorry,
country
where did
where
you say?
Kyrgyzstan and
Okay.
Uzbekistan, both of these places,
Okay.
that was a place where I found finding any vegetarian food very hard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think there were not many vegetarian options in terms of normal food that were available. Almost everything had some sort of animal fat or animal meat in it. However, I was lucky to travel with our team here, and we pre-packaged a lot of food and carried it with us. So we were able to cook a lot of our meals ourselves, and that helped in not having to rely on the food that I would find otherwise. So, considering all of this, I think even during the travel, even during trekking, I think it has been quite easy to be a vegan and continue to be a
Okay. So even I know, like, India Hikes does a lot of these high altitude treks, and nutrition and protein intake is something that is very essential for a trekker.
vegan.
So does a vegan diet meet all the nutritional needs of a regular trekker?
Yes, definitely. I think we do get a lot of vegan trekkers who come and tell us that they are vegan and they would like to have a vegan menu on the trek.
Okay.
And if you notice our menu, it is predominantly vegan.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly, it is our little bit of our breakfast has elements of milk and sometimes egg. And our desserts are very heavily dairy based. But outside that, almost every other item in the menu is vegan.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually quite, I find it very easy to be a vegan on the trek than actually
Oh yeah,
outside. Yeah.
that's
So yeah,
surprising.
it is, I think that way, we've been very conscious of not trying to make it very um, dairy heavy or
Mm-hmm.
uh, it's always been vegetarian menu.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, we've even simplified that and even try to reduce the amount of dairy we use on the trek menu. So overall, it is very vegan that way.
Okay. And maybe in the future, do you think does India Hikes even plan to go vegan with their meals?
We have already tried to strip down as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if it is easy and conducive, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so as I mentioned, like if you really consider our menu, apart from like 5, 6 items,
Mm-hmm.
everything else is vegan. So in that sense, I think we're already almost there. So yeah, um, I'm
Okay.
not too sure whether we will be able to strip down further, but maybe yes. Mhm.
But yeah, I think it's also these baby steps that you take gradually
Yes,
that really
yes.
matters
Got
in the whole picture. Yeah. So I also know that Lakshmi, you are a zero waste practitioner. So can you suggest some ways to travel with zero waste?
So when it comes to traveling with zero waste, I always carry my sustainability kit
Mm-hmm.
with me. It has few dabbas, stainless steel dabbas, where I can carry my food and also take food from any restaurant where they serve in like disposable plates or disposable cutlery. I also carry with me my own spoons, my own fork if required. I tend to avoid anything that is single use on my travel.
Mm-hmm.
I preemptively anticipate that people might give me cutlery that are single use, for example, straws or fork or spoons without even me asking. So I go tell them well in advance not to give me any of that. I even tell them a lot of times not to give me tissue or napkins. I always carry a cloth napkin with me at all times. Outside this, I also have my own water bottle, a reusable water bottle. And very recently, I also got a filter uh, for my water bottle so that even during travel, I can just take water because that's one of the biggest deterrents. Which pushes people to buy bottled water is their fear that my tap water might not be
Mm-hmm.
um, clean. So I even purchased recently a filter, which has been quite conducive that way to help um, filter water and remove that problem of having to worry about water hygiene.
Mm-hmm.
Outside that, during my travel, I also carry my menstrual cup and my cloth pads because you never know when you might have your periods. So I'm always ready to, I'm even in my travels, I'm ready to handle my periods in a very sustainable way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, these and now I also carry with me a lot of cloth pouches. So in case I want to buy something, like for example, I want to buy a snack, I want to buy something um, to eat, then I have the cloth pouches to get them in it, and I don't have to worry about buying anything packaged. So all of this in general helps me to travel very lean without having to create any sort of waste whatsoever. Um, and yeah, and even my toiletries have kind of stripped it down to very bare minimum. I don't really carry so many things in my toilet kit. I have a simple soap bar, which also I can use as a shampoo bar. Outside that, I have my own bamboo toothbrush. I have my own tooth powder that I use instead as an alternative for toothpaste. I have a deodorant bar, again, which is doesn't come in any single-use packaging or plastic packaging. So all of this has enabled me to kind of strip down the kind of waste I might generate while I'm traveling.
Understand. And if you could give us like a quick in terms of brands, what brands do you look at when you think of zero waste? Or do you know, I think in Oroville there are lots of these brands, like the Bamboo Center. So where do you kind of procure your products from?
So I used to procure my source my shampoo bar and soap bars from a place called Centora,
Mhm.
that's in Bangalore. However, they've just recently closed down, and now I am switching to Stone Soup. They also have an online portal where they have almost everything available in their own online place. So I've been recently purchasing even the shampoo bars and the soap bars and all of that from there. So that's the place I'm kind of currently going to for that.
Okay. And as also part of the Green Trails initiative, and I know India Hikes tries their best to travel with less waste and manage waste at source. So can you just tell us a little bit in terms of how to manage plastic waste on the mountain slope as like an individual trekker, not going through an organization? Because when you go through an organization, it kind of becomes easier because there's already a process in place, but say
Right.
it's like, an individual record or just like a group of two, three people. How do you think, can you give us like quick advices or quick tips on how do we manage waste?
Right. If you are a trekker who is doing the trek on your own, it is going to be quite hard to reduce all kind of waste on your trek,
Mhm.
because one of the biggest source of your waste would be your meals. So how you plan your meals, how you execute your meals will determine how much waste you will generally generate. Few tips here that we tend to follow is that a lot of times we plan and prepare for our meals well in advance over here. Like for example, if I'm planning for a trek, I usually prepare lots of chutneys, lots of condiments, lot of pickles that I can pack in reusable containers and take it with me. So all I need is things like semolina to make suji upma, which is quite easy to carry and quite easy to make on the trek, or rice, which is quite again easy to make on the trek. And I have already prepared these food items well in advance. I mix it and then I have it on the trek. So doing this pre-work helps me to reduce a lot of waste on the trek. If you're not going to be able to do that, you will generate quite a bit of waste. And when you do that, and sometimes it is not possible for you to be able to plan all of this well in advance, in such cases, whatever waste you do generate, we must be mindful of washing it, cleaning it very well, because most of the food waste, uh, the plastic waste that we get, gets contaminated by the food. So you can't do much with it. So first thing is to get these in perhaps recyclable plastic and avoid single-use plastic. And second, clean it, bring it down, and take it down to a municipality and then dispose it over there. Again, because most of these treks are in very remote locations where there is no waste management system, into a place where there is at least a good waste management system available, makes a huge difference in how we uh, handle, contribute to the waste in general. So that goes in a long way to tackle waste on it.
Amazing. Um, and since I've also been part of the Green Trails program, could you also tell us a little bit about some of the success stories India Hikes has had so far?
Yes. So as part of Green Trails, one of the biggest things that you will see, or it's kind of like an icon for Green Trails, is our eco bags. So eco bags are these small pouches that go around a trekker's waist, and every one of our trekkers gets the eco bags with them. So using the eco bags, we encourage our trekkers to not litter on the trail. We'll tell them, why don't you go one step forward and pick up waste that you see on the trail. Through this initiative of having our trekkers help out in cleaning the trails, we have collected over 1 lakh 10,000 kgs of waste in the last 6 years. Not just that, we've been able to bring it down, segregate it, and ensure that only about 50 to 40% of the waste goes down to the landfill. We've been successful in at least removing or putting the other 40% back in a recycling cycle or the circular economy part of manufacturing. So that has been one of the biggest impacts that we've been able to have through green trades. The second is our composting. So one of the biggest challenges of trekking remotely is how do you manage your human waste? How do you manage your food waste? Both of which organic, both of which very difficult to bring down and dispose safely. But at the same time, it is also difficult to decompose in the kind of extreme climate situations that you experience on the trek. So our design of our bio toilets, and which are dry toilets, which are composting toilets, have evolved so much that we are now able to handle most of our human waste on the trek at source, and we're able to not just leave it as is, but we're able to compost it and make it a resource for the environment that we're trekking in. Similarly, even for our food waste, we've been able to manage that. So that's again one of the impacts that we've had. Third is, as an organization, one of our goals is to see how can you reduce your own water footprint? How do you reduce your energy footprint? How do you reduce your ecological footprint? And through a lot of design of how we go about our treks, we've reduced our per person, per trekker consumption of water by almost 50 to 60% so far. Just through the design of how we have our washing area, how we have our dry toilets instead of wet toilets. All of this have helped us to be mindful of what exactly is our footprints on these various ecological or natural resources, and has been able to reduce it very further. Now we are also continuing to work on figuring out how can we reduce our energy footprint, which involves the LPG gas that we take on our trek, the number of meals that we take on the trek. So these are very conscious efforts that we are putting in, but I would say these are the main impacts that we, or success stories we've had so far.
And I think that's amazing to hear that, and I don't know if this is like this is a personal dilemma I feel. I don't know if this happens to you, but especially when you go to these places like the mountains or ecologically sensitive zones, I think when you see waste, you just want to go pick it up. And but as soon as you come back to the city, for me there's this shift, because I see garbage in there's every street and nook and corner. There's a huge heap of garbage sitting there, and I just ignore it. To me, it's like, so I don't know, how do you deal with something like this? Because you are both in the city, you're traveling. How is it for you?
It is quite a challenge. I think to be able to, it makes you want to put into perspective what you're doing in your daily life. I mean, you
Yeah.
realize, okay, what makes, I mean, when you go on the mountains and you're being very conscious, and when you're conscious of what you consume, what you are leaving behind, and you know you're able to create an impact, and you come back and you say that, is that impact really relevant? Is that really going to make a difference? You do question where is this really leading to? But I think it also gives you a lot of hope and courage to understand that these do matter, and it gives you inspiration to take back those same practices and come back and do that in your daily life. So I think that is what I'm looking for, and I'm hoping that it's not just, if the shift doesn't just happen with me, but even with the trekkers. I hope what I see in the mountains gives me conviction to be more stronger with my zero waste practice back at home. And I'm hoping that it kind of gives that same shift for our trekkers. And I hope that if more and more trekkers come back with that shift, maybe I can make a difference back here in the city. I don't know. I mean, it's a far-fetched ideal, but I'm hoping that
Yeah.
it might have an impact.
Yeah. And I think what really stood out from this conversation was you're always thinking of the bigger picture, but if you start with yourself individually, I think that's the main thing that really
Yes.
matters, and it's, again, as you said, if some of the trekkers even take, say, like a 0.5% of what India hikes and what the philosophy of green trails is about back home, that itself is such a big achievement.
True.
So yeah.
I hope the same. Like that's what makes us very happy when we get trekkers come back and say, you know what, because of what I saw on the trek, I am doing habits back in my home. I'm not buying anything packaged. I'm reducing my own waste. I'm making composting at home. Those kind of conversations from our trekkers, once they finish the trek, makes me very happy. It makes me feel like, okay, I think what we're doing is not just for the mountains. We can make a change here by using our trek as a tool to bring about a seed of change in our trekkers.
True, very true. And this is a last question, and coming back to vegan. Personally, I am a vegetarian. However, I do want to shift to like a vegan diet. So, kind of, what advice would you give to those who even want to start or make that shift? Is there like a particular, is there like a particular thing that they need to do? Is it like a mind shift change? What is it?
I would say just become a vegan overnight. That is what has worked for me. I've always tried saying, okay, I will go to it very slowly.
Yeah.
It has never happened. I think you always have that, it always brings you back. If you take one step forward, there are instances where we bring you two steps back.
Mhm.
What has worked for me is that deciding one day that I'll just turn vegan, and I just stood by that decision. And I had a strong reason to back that decision. So every time I was tempted, that what I saw in the documentary would just flash over my eyes, and that would just overcome all the temptation that I would have to give up on what I had decided for myself. So find that reason, find that what would flash before your eyes to give you that conviction, and take that step overnight. It's never makes sense to try and do it gradually. Just do it and give it that 2 months time. It's not just with me. I think I've spoken to everyone who has turned vegan, and all of them said the same thing. It's just that the first 1 month is perhaps hard, where you have to fight your temptation. But if you stick with it, within a month or so, you don't have that craving anymore. You actually stop liking to go back to that old lifestyle, and you enjoy being a vegan. And you just need to hit that point. And once you're able to get there, I think nothing like it. So that would be my tip.
Okay.
And luckily enough, I think we're living in Bangalore. I think there is so many alternatives available. There is, I think, plenty of choices to be a good vegan at this point of time. There are so many resources, so many alternatives available, that it almost has become uh, very easy to be a vegan at this point of time. So, yeah.
That's true. You also, I think, mentioned a documentary that kind of changed
Yes.
the way. Can you
Yeah.
tell us the name of the documentary if you
Yeah.
remember?
It was called The Dominion.
Okay, Dominion. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Okay, awesome. And now we have like a quick rapid fire round.
Sure.
So I just need quick answers. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So what is your like one favorite vegan restaurant in Bangalore?
I really like Just Be.
Okay.
Yeah. So Just Be would my option. Yeah.
Okay. What would your alternate career option be?
I would have wanted to be a veterinarian.
Okay. And if you had to choose between cats or dog, what would you?
I have both. I love both. I'm a very animal person, so very difficult to make choices.
Okay. And what is your like most memorable trek so far in India?
Kashmir Great Lakes. This was my first ever trek
Okay.
in the Himalayas, and it still remains my favorite.
Okay, amazing. So that ends today's episode. Thank you so much, Lakshmi, for joining us
Thank you.
today. It's
You're most
lovely
welcome.
having you on board, knowing more about your journey into veganism. And there's always this thing between when you travel, how does one reciprocate their lifestyle? And I think you beautifully said some of the things that people could implement, and it's not something that is rocket science. It's just that basic practice that you have. So yeah, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yes.
Thank you.